Hello, everyone.
Wait a minute.
Good evening and welcome. Hello. Welcome again to our Education System in Crisis series. Tonight, we are focusing on the Gwinnett County Public Schools COVID response during the pandemic. As you know, we started this series this summer to explain systemic racism in the education system and how we got to this point that we're in right now. So we focused on various topics, Native American boarding schools. We focused on disparities in Gwinnett County Public Schools when it comes to opportunities and discipline. So tonight we're going to focus on GCPS's COVID response and the solutions that we think the county should adopt moving forward. So I'm going to share the presentation. Okay, Education System in Crisis, GCPS COVID response. $2,319 million. You're probably wondering why this astronomical number is on the screen, but if you can believe it, this is the fiscal year 2020 budget for Gwinnett County Public Schools. Yes, Gwinnett County Public Schools has billions of dollars in their yearly fiscal budget. And I understand that there's over 180,000 school students that this system has to teach, and there are so many responsibilities regarding what each student needs. But billions of dollars are being used, and a lot of this money is being misused and could be put to better use. For example, we know that over $10 million goes to just to the staff, the SRO staff for school police. That doesn't include the special courtroom where they expel and suspend students. It doesn't include all the other disciplinary infrastructure they use, but just for school police, they use $10 million. We also know that the central office with the at the Instructional Support Center for GCPS, the administration is very heavy with endless amounts of employees who are not needed and are not necessary, and they make high salaries. So we have kindergarten teachers who are teaching without paraprofessionals. We have students who are learning, who are not learning in their primary language and not being taught in a way that they can understand. They don't have adequate resources, but we have $10 million for school police, and we have an untold amount of money for admin for the central staff. And so this money has to be spent better. And with this amount of money every year, you can be more creative and more resourceful in how to meet all the needs for every student. So we're just going to go through a timeline. We did a short timeline earlier this fall, but we're going to do a longer timeline to talk about what has been happening with the GCPS's COVID response. So it started, we know that the last day of school for the 2019 to 2020 school year was March 12th, 2020. And after that, things really went downhill for a lot of students, and especially those who did not have the resources that more affluent students have. And the first sign that we had that GCPS was not going to adhere to the science, was not going to make research and science-based decisions, was in May, when they decided that they were going to bring back all the staff so they can close back the year. The teachers were very upset. They were contacting the media. They started a petition. This picture is a headline from an AJC article that said Gwinnett educators blast plan return to school, district appears to be listening. Well, actually the district didn't really listen that much. They changed the way that they phrased the return, but it was not a major difference in how they handled having staff all back in the building, because they continued to have staff in the building throughout the summer and still didn't have necessary precautions to protect the staff during the fall, all the way up till now. There was a COVID survey during the summer, which closed in July, which allowed community members to give feedback on reopening and if it should be reopened, how should GCPS reopen. At Gwinnett SToPP, we know that these efforts to reach out to the community are rarely genuine. They're part of their public relations to make it seem like they're considering what you're thinking, but very rarely does it actually incorporate community input in an honest way. Often what we see with GCPS is that they're looking for someone to rubber stamp their policies and practices. They're not really looking to change. After that survey, GCPS first released a plan to go back to school as normal. The only thing that they were offering was a digital option. So if you were affluent, because remember, Gwinnett County Public Schools is for upper middle class to wealthy students who have the resources to make certain decisions. So if you had the money to stay home, have a parent stay home with you, have all the devices and things that you need so that you can learn from home, then you could do that. But let's say your child was in kindergarten and you had to go to work. Obviously that wasn't an option for you. That was an option with people who had the resources to stay home. Then we saw teacher protests, and this one is from was taken by Natasha Chen from CNN. This is a teacher who put a sign in their windshield saying, "Stop denying science, it's reckless." GCPS has denied science from the beginning, and they still deny science now in response to this pandemic. So during this, during the teacher protests at the Instructional Support Center, they were demanding that a plan be put in place that actually protects teachers and allows them to avoid getting COVID. There were counter protesters. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've seen with the United States is this obsession with individualism, not caring how things impact other people. And so we did have privileged people from Gwinnett County come out and push against the restrictions that were put in place and the advocacy that we were doing on behalf of low-income students of color. GCPS revises the plan. They push back the start date a week, and they asked students to wear masks. They continued with the digital option, and then they shared a plan for phasing students in via grade. And that's where we are now. The students who have decided to come to school, they're back, for the most part, they're back in school now. And then you have some who have, since the beginning of the school year, decided to stick with the digital option. So as you can see, it's been a mess. A lot of back and forth, changing plans. GCPS was making national news for having these big cluster, outbreaks. At one time, over 260 people from a certain school or a certain cluster were exposed. So it's been very messy and it hasn't been consistent. And it's clear that Gwinnett was just worried about going back to business as usual without wanting to take the necessary precautions to do any of this safely. So GCPS was unprepared and they failed to reopen safely. So in the beginning, In the spring, I told you that the first day or the last day of in-person school was March 12th. And because the rest of that spring was done at home, it was digital learning across the board. What we found was that the digital divide got even bigger. So what was a crack before became a canyon. And one of the things that people who have been advocating for equity, for racial justice, for equality of any kind, we've noticed how the pandemic has exacerbated inequities that were already there. So anything that we're having a problem with now is not new. The pandemic didn't create it. The pandemic exposed it, made it worse. And the digital divide, which is a way that we describe the lack of resources that some low-income families have, whether it be access to internet, to devices, to any type of technology, was already bad before. GCPS does a lot online. They're doing more online, like a lot of schools. Technology is becoming more and more a part of everything. So checking your grades online, doing assignments online, taking tests online. GCPS will allow students to bring their own devices to school and use them during the class period to do certain things. They'll let them take quizzes on their phones. So you can imagine if you're a student that doesn't have access to this, if your parents can't afford a cell phone and a cell phone plan, if you don't have consistent devices, and you have you have brothers and sisters, you have siblings, and you only have like one computer at home, this can become very difficult very quickly. So the digital divide became so bad during the pandemic. It was the fact that if you did not have access to a reliable internet connection and devices, you did not receive education, period. You just didn't, because there was no in-person learning at all. Now, that's not an excuse to open schools haphazardly, but it is a reason to take this digital divide more seriously and use some of the hundreds of millions of dollars that you have to make sure that every student has access to internet and devices so that they can do their work and they can be successful. We cannot ask about this achievement gap when we have such a huge resource gap. There was a severe shortage of Chromebooks from in the spring and in the fall. Well, we've heard testimony in late into the fall, October, November, from teachers saying that we still don't have enough Chromebooks. And it's not, and I do understand that there probably is a lot of orders being put in place right now, but this was an issue before. This was an issue not having enough devices, not having devices that students could take home or access outside of the classroom. This was an issue before the pandemic. And this is something that Gwinnett SToPP and parents and advocates, community members have been telling the district to pay attention to no avail. And we had a one Chromebook per family policy or practice in the spring, where GCPS was giving sometimes one Chromebook per family, which is very discriminatory, especially if you have 2-3 siblings and you have one Chromebook. But the thing is, they have these lack of resources to not be able to give students, what they need to do their work, but they want to hold them accountable for making sure that they're in class, that they're behaving. I mean, they're still doing disciplinary proceedings. So it's always the case for Black children in the United States of America that the state, the city, the county, the district will fall short and fail to provide adequate resources and not be held accountable. But this child needs to be held accountable. So you're holding children who are going through a pandemic accountable for doing all of these things, these grades, their behavior, everything that they're doing online and through the camera, but you're not even providing them with consistent with devices and internet and things that they can do so they can make sure that they can do their work. So it's a problem that we see often, that we're not providing students with everything that they need to succeed. But if they fail, we blame them, even if they weren't given what they needed. So to go into this digital divide further, we see that there's 2 school systems in one district. So I picked this illustration, I think, which really shows what we're talking about when we talk about a digital divide. When we see the student sitting in the gray area, this represents not being connected to the internet, not being able to access education, whether it's videos or assessments. This is being left in the dark. And so what advocates around the country who focus on education equity have seen is that students are losing a chance to their future, losing opportunities when they do not have access to the devices and the things that they need. So, for example, if you're talking about the student who is sitting in the dark, their parent could be an essential worker, someone who is contributing to the community and making sure, doing this essential work, but not receiving essential resources for their child. Unstable internet connection could be something they're experiencing, because this is a pandemic. There is economic fallout, and no support, financial support being given from the government to support us. There's a lack of devices in families that need to have, especially when you have multiple people who need to access devices for work or school. And there's no expendable income to turn your house into a classroom. Some students in Gwinnett County, the income disparities are large. Some students have their own room dedicated to them learning, them playing, and they have everything that they need. Some students are at the kitchen table, if they have a kitchen table, sharing it with many people, and they don't have the space to have a classroom, a pop-up classroom that mom and dad can furnish with a printer and like markers and pencils and paper. That is privilege. Not everyone has that, and GCPS was not providing that. So you're looking at, so for some families, they have a parent who has an advanced education, can work at home from the comfort of their home. Not saying that working at home and helping your child with their education is easy, but it's an option that some people weren't even given. Stable internet, devices, and access to a tutor. We've had parents who've told us that GCPS will tell us, your child is struggling, hire a tutor. Not everyone has expendable income, and you're making assumptions. When you're telling people to go to do all of these outside things that they may not be able to afford. So once again, GCPS is a school system that's made for affluent children. Failing at science. GCPS gets an F for how they've had done their procedures, their COVID procedures based on science, because they just haven't. To be a school district that prides themselves on doing math and STEM classes and preparing their students for going into technology, math, and science, they've been completely ignoring the science at every turn, and they've been more focused on public relations than health. The numbers that they're reporting are different than the actual numbers. We have teachers who are telling us, we are counting what's going on. We are counting how many people we've seen getting sick or leaving their classrooms, and it is not matching what the district is reporting about our school. There are human resources teams, HR teams, who are making the decisions, not based on science, about who stays and who goes. And they're making those decisions based on how many staff members they want to have in the school to keep the school going, not based on who actually needs to go because they've tested positive and they are a danger to everyone else. There's a lack of social distancing, especially in our general education classes where you have 27, 28 students in one classroom. In some of these classrooms, you have kids who were borrowing chairs from the classroom next door. I mean, it was already cramped, right? So to have 6 feet apart for almost 30 kids is just not going to happen. And so there is a lack of social distancing. And so they should have planned for a way that kids can have in-person education and there was enough room to social distance. They have billions of dollars. They have access to so many resources and professionals and experts in the CDC, and the list goes on, but they did not utilize any of that. Also with the substitute teachers, there is a severe lack of substitute teachers and staff to carry out social distancing. Part of the misinformation that the district gave at the beginning of the pandemic to try to calm teachers and staff and support staff was that, we had a 93% fulfillment rate for our absences, our vacancies that were fulfilled by subs. We had a 93% fulfillment rate at the beginning of March. So, and that was the onset of the pandemic. And we're going to hire more people. So there's no need to worry. When August comes, we'll definitely have the substitute teachers that we need. And that was a lie. First of all, at the beginning of March, people did not realize how bad this was, how bad the pandemic was going to be. And that realization didn't sink in for a lot of people till towards the end of March, end of March. At the beginning of March, people were still operating as if nothing was going on. Most people weren't wearing masks. It wasn't until towards the middle of March, going towards the end, that people started to mask up and take this seriously and plan ahead. So that's one reason why that would not be reliable. Second reason is that some of the substitute teachers, a significant amount of them are actually retired, are using this as a second career. And so they're at high risk to be impacted, negatively impacted by COVID. And so they're not going to be persuaded into taking more assignments easily. And substitute teaching is optional. You can choose an assignment that day or you cannot. It's not mandatory. You have a lot of freedom. And so we've heard from GCPS staff that the vacancies are just not being filled. There's numerous vacancies and the fulfillment rate is nothing what they said it was going to be. Culture of secrecy. Yeah, so this is something that we talk a lot about at Gwinnett SToPP. It's not just that GCPS they're not doing the right thing. They're not treating students equally and certainly not equitably. It's not just that. It's that when we try to assess the problem and we try to get more information, they hide stuff. They conceal the data. They don't hold themselves to the promises they've made to the community about releasing certain data on a regular basis. They make it difficult for us to obtain things that they're supposed to be keeping up anyways. It's a culture of secrecy that a lot of teachers, and because when we're trying to figure out things going on in the school, a lot of teachers hesitate to talk to advocates, to talk to attorneys, people who are trying to advocate for more just schools, because they know that they could they might lose their job, they might be reprimanded, that it might impact their employment. And that is a very toxic work culture. And in a time like this, it can actually be deadly. This no transparency, not talking about the true and actual numbers of of COVID positive tests can lead to people unnecessarily getting COVID and getting sick or even dying from COVID. So this is something very serious that GCPS is doing. We've talked to staff, GCPS staff, and they said that they're forbidden from disclosing their own status if they've tested positive or negative. Now, I understand sometimes when you're talking about someone else's illness or health, there's confidentiality around that. There's HIPAA, there's all sorts of laws. But when it comes to you wanting to disclose it and because you have been in direct contact with certain employees, certain people, you should be able to disclose that because you want to keep the actual rate down. But no, they want to make GCPS more than the health, more than actually keeping the rates down. They actually just want to make it seem like everything's okay. So many people, unfortunately, so many people in this country have taken this approach that we're just going to pretend like COVID didn't happen. We're going to stay open, economy. We're not going to live we're going to live our lives just like we used to do before. There's a denial, a lot of denial about the truth and the responsibilities that need to happen in order to make sure that people are safe if you're going to have open schools. So I think GCPS is in deep denial and not wanting to do what really needs to be done. And they just want to make it look like they're doing something. And there's punishment. The staff member told me that you can get written up for disclosing your status, for telling other people that you've been in contact with that you have COVID. A staff member told us one co-teacher was not allowed to tell the other teacher that they tested positive. So co-teaching is something that happens often at GCPS. And one of the most common ways is that you have a general education teacher and you have a teacher who's certified in special education to come in and teach with them. And so when they teach together, they can assist the students according to their needs, right? This was a case where one of the co-teachers tested positive and was not allowed to tell the co-teacher that they tested positive because the HR team determined that that was a contact of a contact. So they're playing with contact of a contact, direct contact. They're playing with these terms so that they can keep as many people, many staff working in the building as possible. And that's really dangerous because you're really spreading the virus that way and you're not being honest with the public of how bad it is. And you're worsening community spread as well. You're impacting Gwinnett County, you're impacting Georgia, and who knows where else you're impacting is based on where people are traveling and going to. So moving forward, we have to do things differently. And we do have 2 new board members, Karen Watkins and Dr. Therese, who are coming onto the board this coming year. And we're hoping for a change and a difference for the 2021-2022 school year. If you can believe it, we're getting that close. And it's important that we do things differently because I believe for the next school year, there will be even more students returning that may have stayed home for digital learning all this school year. So here are some of the solutions. We need a real plan. Our director, Marlon Tillman, is suggesting that we have A/B scheduling where students are floating in and out to get in-person and online learning. So remember when I said that you have almost 30 students in one class, you can't social distance. And when you go to other different parts of the building, it's really hard when you're switching classes to maintain that distance. So if we have certain amounts of students coming in and out of the building and we schedule them at certain times so that we have more space to spread out and be in different rooms, that would be a way which we can actually do social distancing. And I think that would actually have a positive impact on the learning as well if we were able to lessen the amount of students for certain amounts of time and hopefully catch up on all of the things that have been missed for this past school year, which has been very difficult for many. We believe that in this plan, we should pay attention to students with disabilities who are receiving in-school services. There's no need for interruption of those services. If students with disabilities are relying on the school to have certain things that only the school can provide, whether it's equipment or specialized staff, that needs to be incorporated into that plan and taken seriously. We also need to phase in students based on grade in 2-week increments. So the quarantine, the 14-day quarantine period, we should apply that to the phase-in process to make sure that we have a handle on which students have COVID and how the spread is going. We also think that teachers with compromised immune systems should be allowed to work at home. Some teachers have mentioned that they are at high risk if they go to the school, that they love their job, they want to help the students, but they shouldn't have to do that. They shouldn't have to risk their lives to do that, and we completely agree. If they are in the building, they should be able to be isolated. We need a real cleaning plan to make sure that that we're cleaning thoroughly, doing deep cleans regularly. GCPS promised to do that. That is not consistent across the board in all the GCPS schools. And be creative, think outside of the box and use the tremendous amount of resources that the county has to do things like look at air filtration, look at ways to just make this easier and make the environment less contagious. So air filtration will recycle air in and out and replace the air that is in the room and has the coronavirus and completely recycle it out with fresh new air. There are certain air purifiers that are capable of removing coronavirus. There are several names already floating out there. So GCPS should take a look into that. This is something that different companies and systems are looking at. And so this could be a possible solution to help with long-term. And finally, in closing, it's time to reimagine education. Sometimes situations like we find ourselves in the pandemic are really opportunities, opportunities to redo, to start from scratch. And I think that even before the pandemic, we saw that the education system was failing so many kids. It was failing students with disabilities. It was failing Black students, failing students of color generally, failing Native American students, failing girls in STEM. It is failing so many students. And when a system is failing that many people, that system needs to be thrown out. So this is a time to reimagine education, to prepare for the long haul. There is not going to be a magic wand that takes away coronavirus for the year 2021, as many people would like to believe that this is going to be a new year and that is in the past. No, coronavirus will be coming with us into the new year. So it's very important that we have a plan for the long term. The vaccine process is going to be very lengthy, and many people in this country have issues with vaccines. And so it's time to make a long-term plan and lobby at the federal level for financial support for things like the air filtration systems and ways that we can fund social distancing and making sure that our teachers are safe, our support staff is safe. And speaking of support staff, have been exposed to coronavirus often at higher rates. When we're talking about our bus managers who have had to deal with many students on the school bus from different schools, and they are not being protected. Our parapros are not being protected either, and they're not being included. Not only were they excluded from the bonus that GCPS gave out to teachers only, but they're also being excluded from the conversations about how to keep how we stay safe, and I think their opinion matters as well. So it's important that we look at everyone who is involved, especially those who are taking the highest risk and being exposed to hundreds of students a day. So thank you so much for listening. As always, you have here's our information to contact us. We have some really cool stuff on our website at www.GwinnettStop.org. We have a whole center for our Kick Cops Out campaign. We also have some really neat things that are in the works that we'll be revealing soon. So stay tuned. This is the last installment, at least for this year. And we're glad that we got to talk to you about so many things about still separate and unequal education, about the disparities in Gwinnett County with education opportunities and discipline, and so many things that we're still trying to fight for education equity. So thanks again for joining us. Feel free to share this, to leave comments. We can answer questions, and we hope that you have a very happy and safe holiday, and we will see you soon.